Hi there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, the regular disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. Hi there. Before we dive into today's episode, another conversation with myself and AC Bergen Fischer, I wanted to go over a couple of announcements and reminders. An announcement that the third annual Moving Beyond Family Struggles Summit event has opened its doors for registration. That event is going to be October 12th through the 15th. It is free and online, and there will be a link where you can register to attend that event in the show notes. So if you're interested in that, there will be myself and 29 other experts in the field of estrangement and reconciliation. So it's a valuable summit that happens once a year. Again, this is the third year, and I was honored to have been invited for the first time this year myself. So feel free to sign up for that, spread the news, send the link to others who you feel might be interested in this event. Again, October 12th through the 15th. And I believe my presentation will be on the third day. But all that information comes to you once you register for the event. The second announcement is I wanted to bring attention to AC's podcast called In the Blood. And if you're interested in hearing some things strictly from AC, you can find his podcast available on all the major platforms as well. Again, that's called In the Blood. And I believe the last thing I had to cover today is a reminder that we are still searching for estranged parents and estranged adult children who are interested in being in a group together online on Facebook. This group will be heavily moderated. Again, myself and AC are the admins of the group, and there is an application process. So if you're interested in that, please email me, theestrangedheart@gmail.com. That, again, will be in the show notes as well. But send me an email if you're interested, and applications will go out the week of August the 7th. The group will begin in September. Again, heavily moderated group, and the purpose of this group is not necessarily support in the traditional support group sense, but it is a place for us to come together to grow and learn. And my hope is to see things from the other person's perspective, look at the other side of the coin, so to speak, so we can heal some relationships and move forward and be in relationship in healthier ways. So if you're interested in that, shoot me an email. And today's two quotes before we get into the topic of the episode is, the first one is, the truest, most beautiful life never promises to be an easy one. We need to let go of the lie that it is supposed to be. And that is by Glennon Doyle. And the second is, parenthood is above all a relationship, not a skill to be acquired. Attachment is not a behavior to be learned, but a connection to be sought. And that is by Dr. Gabor Mate. On to today's episode.
Oh, yeah, you wanted me to start talking.
Yeah. I'm going to have you take the lead today.
Yeah, I've been thinking a little bit the last couple of days about these situations where there is not necessarily a parting of ways, but maybe just even like a conflict, a misunderstanding. And I think more often than not, as people, when we feel like we have handled a situation well, we have this tendency to look at the other person as being at fault somehow. You know, we absolve ourselves thinking, well, I used the right tone of voice.
Mhm.
I showed you respect. I stayed on topic. I didn't hurl mud. I didn't this. I didn't that. And you still blew up at me. Therefore, I'm the victim and you are a total a-hole. And even for using myself as an example, like I've been in that situation where it's like I'm wondering, like, what is your deal? Like, why are you blowing up
Mhm.
at me? And I thought, well, instead of sitting there like just leaving that open-ended like question of like, why are you X? Why don't I try to answer that a little bit? And that's sort of where my head got stuck, because I couldn't help but wonder if maybe it's unreasonable to try to isolate an interaction, isolate a conversation, and think, okay, well, I'm only responsible for how I conducted myself within that little slice of reality, rather than looking at the whole big picture and think, okay, like, if I'm having a conversation with my wife and like she, to my from my perspective, she looks like she's overreacted. Again, maybe to that isolated little slice of reality, she's overreacted, but in the context of our whole relationship, maybe she's like seen how this story goes before. Maybe she's heard me sound this way before. And, at the end of things, maybe I haven't handled myself very nicely. And she's just preemptively reacting based on my relationship credit rating. You
Mm.
know what I mean?
Mm. Right.
And getting into like the more into like the realm of estrangement, I've seen this come up like fairly often, like talking to estranged adult children, where it's like their parents might come to them, and they present very differently. They handle themselves comparatively well, compared to what the estranged adult child is used to. But there's this level of mistrust, again, based on, I think, the relationship credit score,
Mhm.
which tells you like, look, this looks more like a change of tactics than a change of heart. And
Mm.
I'm gonna react to this, what appears to be, or what could easily be, manipulative behavior as aggressively as I possibly can, as a means of self-preservation. Now, whether this is right or wrong, I don't know. All I can say is that this is what I've observed in others and in myself. And I don't know if you've got thoughts on that. Have you seen anything similar in your experience, or is this just me rattling around nonsense in my head?
No, I have personally come across that myself in relationships, as well as the work that I've done with um particularly with estranged adult children. I mean, the parents, I think, can come into have had similar experiences where they anticipate a conversation going a particular way based off of history, right? Um, even if their behavior has changed. Um, I often talk about the triggers. And when you're talking about the relationship credit score, I think that's where these triggers come into play, right? When we have this history, and especially in family relationships, we've got decades of history that have built up in a particular way. We've responded and reacted and in one way, and then we come along and we have this change of behavior, yet the other person, typically the children, are skeptical because there's been this broken trust. There's been this relationship credit score that has tanked, in essence. And so the parent is left saying, but I did all this, I did everything right. I did, they were the ones who kept blowing up at me. I hear that often. I hear that
Yeah.
very often. And I try to help parents to see that it may not be that particular scenario that the child is actually reacting to. They're reacting to the history that has been there before. And maybe you said a word or a string of words that is a triggering thing for them. And that's what has set it off, because it's something they've heard all of their life. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me, but I'm a person who's like, I'm a long list of triggers.
Mhm.
Like, and sometimes I can get triggered, by something that doesn't even involve directly the person that I'm dealing with. It can be difficult. I mean, past trauma, man, that could be just a killer for healthy relations. And I think not just, like triggers dealing with different people. I mean, sometimes, I think what ties in with what you're describing, I mean, we can be triggered by the past versions of each other, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
I come up across this with my mom fairly frequently. I mean, we've gotten, thankfully, to a point where we can have a rational discussion about it rather than like slinging mud at each other.
Mhm.
But these feelings, like the really strong feelings, the ones that make me want to, like, you know slam something on the table and storm out of the
Mhm.
room, it's like those feelings are there, just I'm reacted to them differently. I know she is too. I can see it in her face. Like,
Mhm.
I irritate her sometimes because the person who's looking at her looks exactly like the person who used to be a real jerk,
Yes. Yep.
and his voice sounds the same and his mannerisms, like it's all this stuff. And like, one of the more recent things that came up with her is like, we again, thankfully we're able to talk through it, but she said, like, you've gone quiet, like, what's going on? I said, honestly, mom, I'm really pissed off right now.
Mhm.
And she asked me, well, why? And I said, well, you said XYZ. Sorry, Z for the American listeners. You said XYZ, and the first thing that popped into my head was, where the hell were you when I was 6 years old and dad was beating me with a metal rod in the garage? Like, where were you?
Mhm.
And like, I made my peace with my father a long, long time ago. I mean, the man's been dead 21 years. I mean, I'm not gonna,
Mhm.
like, there's no conflict to be had one way or the other at
Right.
this point, right?
Right.
With him. But at the same time, it's like there's obviously some lingering triggers there with
Mhm.
mom. I mean, we've talked through this stuff, and it's really easy to say, hey, I forgive you. It's easy to say I understand you, but it's not an easy thing to disconnect these hot button triggers that put us into a
Correct.
bad emotional place. Because, like, in that moment where I was feeling those really strong feelings, I wasn't a 50-year-old man who'd made peace with his mother. I was a scared, frustrated, confused, hurt, angry, whatever, irrational 6-year-old in the garage wondering, like, what just happened here.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's sort of like a recurring theme with parents and
Mhm.
children, not necessarily like memories of abuse, but it could be memories of like any number of things, memories of disappointment, broken promises, um even something as simple as inconsistency. Actually, that's something that's come up a lot for me in therapy, is realizing how much children crave consistency, and like how consistency, even if like a parent is consistently evil, at least they're consistently predictable, and a
Right.
kid will learn how to navigate that consistency, right?
Yeah.
And when there is a history of inconsistency between parent and child, you get into adulthood, the child now has something to compare experience, and
Mhm.
how to compare their experience up against what they had previously believed to be normal, right? You get
Mhm.
a taste of something outside of the household, you realize, holy crap, it wasn't like this for everybody, it was
Right.
like this for me. And so they want to go and like confront the parent based on this, saying, hey, I've learned that our home life wasn't normal. I've learned that you totally effed me up. What have you to say about it?
Right.
And then poof, big explosion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would like to share an experience that just happened to me as we're talking about this, that I had with my mom. And um, I think it is a prime example of the triggers, right? Had a situation with my mom that occurred, and she wasn't hearing me. I was expressing that I was hurt and upset over something that had happened, and her response to me was, well, I'm sorry that you feel that way, but your feelings are incorrect. And I quickly realized that I had a trigger that has not yet been healed,
Mm,
because I went from 0 to 100, from being slightly upset to enraged in half a nanosecond when she said that to me. And when I was able to get myself calmed down and realized what had transpired, it was, I was triggered because for all of my life, I've been told in some form or fashion that my feelings are incorrect, that I should not be. Why are you mad? Why can't you just be happy? I don't understand why you have to question everything. Why are you feeling like this? No one else feels this way. So when here I am in my mid 50s now, and my mother tells me this, and I was sent right back to childhood, just like
yeah.
sent right back there. And the entire conversation went to hell in a handbasket from that point forward. Right. And this is exactly what happens. This is what I talk to my clients about. When you are looking at your child, your adult child, and they are flying off the handle or saying something that you consider to be irrational, you are most likely not talking to that 28-year-old or 35-year-old or 54-year-old adult child, adult person standing in front of you. You are speaking to the 6-year-old little
Yeah.
boy or the 13-year-old girl who was immensely hurt by things that we did and said as parents. And that is something that parents, I think, have a really difficult time wrapping their heads around, because they're not living there anymore. And so they feel like everybody else, no one else is living there anymore. When in reality, we are, in some form or fashion.
And I think in situations like that, like speaking from the parents' perspective, one thing I wish that more parents would do is to when they're looking at kids, whether they be children or adult children, that they stop looking at like children and adults as different species somehow, and
Mhm.
just think like you're dealing with people no matter what.
Right.
Like people often ask me, well, how do you understand kids so well? It's like I just look at them like they're people and they become very, very easy.
Mhm. Mhm.
Weird because they are.
Right.
And one thing that's true of people of any age is, and of course, the frequency of irrational outbursts is drastically reduced um, as one gets older. Like
Right.
children frequently are going to have their like irrational meltdowns. Adults, I mean, we still have them, but
Mhm.
we're pretty good at putting them on pause for long stretches. But either way, I mean, like as the in this case as the parent, you're dealing with the same thing. I mean, like if I'm thinking, okay, if I was going to deal with my child who's having an irrational outburst, it's like, okay, telling him to calm down, I know from experience, is a waste of time. And like
Mhm.
I would go so far as to say it's stupid. Like it just
Right.
it makes no sense.
Mhm.
Trying to make sense of somebody who's coming from 100 different directions at once, I think is equally a waste of time.
Mhm.
Now, it's not that like when somebody's coming from multiple directions at once, it's not like sense can't be made of it. It just you can't expect a person who's become completely dysregulated to calm themselves down and
Right.
give you like a 3-point sermon in bullet points with a PowerPoint presentation to go along with it, pie charts, all this other crap just to help you understand and to follow
Mm-hmm.
along with what they're saying. You
Mm-hmm.
kind of just have to sit there, open up your ears, close your damn mouth, and just absorb as many details as you possibly can, and then see, okay, like it's like I got a little pop here. Okay, he's upset. Okay, I've got like a gauge of the mental state in a broad sense. Okay, what kind of upset? Well, he's got an angry tone, but he's crying. Could it be that like he's hurt, disappointed, frustrated? That sounds more like a fit. Then you can
Mm-hmm.
start listening to little key pieces of the story. It's like, okay, are there any recurring themes that are coming up while he's communicating from 100 directions at once? And
Mm-hmm.
then you can slowly start steering things towards the subject matter that appears to be like at the tip of the iceberg, and maybe then you'll get access to what's like lying down beneath. And maybe once that person starts feeling a little bit heard, a little bit validated, even if all they feel is noticed and important,
Right.
they can't help but start to calm down. They can't help but start to re-regulate themselves, and they can't help but bring their conversation into focus. But when one person yells and the other person also starts yelling, it's like, you become like like dogs, right? With dogs, they don't really think
Mm-hmm.
things through. A dog barks and the
Mm-hmm.
other dog's like, oh, we're barking now. Bah, 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 bah.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
And what's been accomplished, the second dog has no freaking idea what's going on, and like the first one's getting even louder now because like the first dog had
Mm-hmm.
a legitimate thing to bark about. And like at the end, what happens? Like they either shut up and go their separate ways, or they're at each other's throats. Family
Right.
relationships are the same way, in my experience.
Yes. 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 Exactly. Exactly. And let's talk about this too from, I mean, yes, in the where there's a quote that goes around on social media that says, "Never in the history of anyone has anyone calmed down by being told to calm down." Right? Like just calm down. It just doesn't happen because you're not addressing the issue. The issue isn't that they're not calm. The issue is that there's a hurt or a pain or something there. And then on top of all of that, you also have the parent who hasn't, most likely in many cases, has not dealt with their own childhood triggers. And so they become dysregulated.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have two dysregulated people, unregulated people who are just, it's all gone to hell in a handbasket at that point. And the best thing to do is to disengage until one person can come back into the conversation regulated. But when you have, and this is why doing the work is so important as a parent, if you're to deal with your own stuff so that you can be present for your children who are still dealing and working through their issues and thoughts and things like that. And your kids are in turn trying to do that. They're trying to work through their issues for their children. So this is, the spiral down effect, if you will. Yeah.
So something I wanted to just interrupt you with quickly, like you'd mentioned parents not having dealt with their own childhood stuff and like how it sort of like in turn affects their ability to parent. One of the things that like it seems to come up. I mean, I read comments on things, I read podcast reviews,
Mm-hmm.
including the reviews and the comments on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that's come up a couple of times from people, I don't know if they like completely get like what the message is supposed to be here. I think some people are feeling kind of like singled out as parents, whereas like possibly you and I both, I mean, I don't really know, based on a sentence or two, feel like all the pressure is being put on the parents to like deal with everything, and all the pressures on them, and like, yeah, of course it's mommy and daddy's fault, the kids are just perfect little angels, they're victims, they're this, they're that.
Mm-hmm.
um I don't personally see it that way. Whereas I think that like a parent has got a lot more pressure put on them to fix the situation. I don't think that they are solely responsible. And a quote that I read not too long ago that really like it hit me hard because there's so much truth to it. It was something along the lines of, when I was growing up, I didn't realize that I was watching my parents grow up too.
Mm, hmm.
And I think as kids, we need to understand that. Because I mean, now that I'm 50 years old, I'm thinking like I still feel like a child in a lot of ways. Like I don't have my shit together. I really don't. I got questions, anxieties, is like I don't handle every situation properly. But when I was a kid watching my parents like at 30 and 40 and 50,
Hmm.
there was this expectation like, hey, you're the grown-ups. You got like all the answers, you got it all together. Like take care of me, take care of everything. And now I'm like I got people looking at me. I'm supposed to be the grown-up. I don't
Right.
have the answers, but the child inside of me is still looking at my parents, holding them to this unreasonable standard that I know that like I shouldn't be held to. So I think whereas like yes, parents absolutely do your work, kids like please like can you try at least to cut mom and dad some slack, because whether or not they were trying their best, they were just I don't say like fumble fucking their way through it, basically,
Right.
right? It's like there's
Right.
no pretty way to say it. You're dealing with like
Mhm.
clueless people who in turn raise damaged people who are probably going to be clueless people who raise more damaged people. It's
Right.
just the circle of life.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, I am an advocate, strong advocate of parents doing their work and leading, showing, guiding the way for their children. I think because of the power differential in the relationship as a whole, I think there's a place for that. I also, and it's interesting because sometimes the comments that I get, it's as if, there's no curiosity. No one, people make wild assumptions about me without ever asking, well, what do you think about the kids? What do you think for you as an adult child? What's your responsibility here, and things along those lines. um I do think the kids, I think everybody needs to work on their own stuff.
Sure.
I would like to see more children come at this, how their parents parented them, with a bit more curiosity. Why did their parents do what they did? Looking at this bigger picture. However, I also understand that that typically doesn't come until you have enough life experience, have raised some children, have older children, where you've been through some things with your kids, before most of us get to a place where we're a bit curious about what happened with our parents and
Mm-hmm.
why they did the things that they did, etc. In my 20s, I could have cared less what happened to my parents. Like it just wasn't there. I had no curiosity about it. I was they are the parents, they should have their shit together, and they should be being the parent. They should have it together, not recognizing that they too were traumatized. They too had their own set of issues and challenges and things like that. I don't know where the meeting ground is, because I know as an adult child currently, I know it's really difficult for me to make movement with my parents if I don't feel from my parents that I've been seen, heard, and validated, noticed, made important, etc. I can't intellectually say, oh yes, my dad has an ACE score of 9. My mom lost her father when she was 8 or so years old. Like, they've had traumas in their life. I get it. They didn't know. They were young. They were in their mid-20s when I came along, and we all know, I think most of us would agree, that You don't know shit when you're in your mid-20s. You don't. And you're out here raising human beings, right? And trying to get on with life.
Yeah.
I don't know where's that middle ground? Where's that, is there a line? Are there occurrences that happen in life that push us to have more curiosity about our parents? Are the conversations that you and I are having on this podcast, is that a place to spark the curiosity for the adult children about what happened? You know, another question that I would have is, I know the clients that I work with, the parents that I work with, generally moms, typically range from their late 40s into their 70s, mid to late 70s. And I know that for the older generation, it's hard for them to tell me things that have happened in their life, if they are aware of it, even aware of the impact that things that have happened in their life is having on their life and their relationship with their children. So I don't know that they would even have the capacity, not that they wouldn't have a desire to share and heal and repair the relationship, but I don't know what if that's not a possibility? Do you think that I don't know. I'm throwing the questions out there. I don't know.
If I'm going to personalize this, because that's like the best way I have to make sense of things.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about trying to spark a curiosity about parents.
Mm-hmm.
I did develop a curiosity about my parents, but it was not because I started thinking about my parents or what makes them tick. It's because like I started thinking about myself.
Mm.
I actually did a podcast episode about this on Turn Up the AC, talking about how every year on my birthday, my mom would phone. Well, she still does it. She phones me, and it's like, starting my 20th birthday, 20 years ago today, there was joy in the home of Carlos and Denise. And, she would go on that line, and she would tell the story about all the different events that transpired on the day of my birth. And I had basically explored this whole idea that like my whole adult life, I had it in my head that that was where my story began. Right. And when I started realizing that like things were a little differently, like my last birthday, my mom phoned me and she said it was X number of years ago today, because she is old. She doesn't remember how
Mm.
many years ago I was born.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to come to terms with the fact that, the day's going to come where I'm going to be waking up on my birthday and that phone's not going to ring. And if I got questions that I want answered about like where I came from, now's the time to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And my brain just started going in different directions. I wasn't thinking about any more like, January 24, 1973. That's not where I began. I began sometime in the spring of 1972 when
Mm-hmm.
mom and dad had a twinkle in their eye. And, one thing led to another, and I had questions around that, not the actual special hug for mommies and daddies,
Right.
but,
Right.
were you trying to have me? Was I planned?
Mm-hmm.
Where did you live? What were finances all about? Like,
Right.
what was important to you at that time? And when my mom started answering these questions for me, and it's not like I was the first kid, but I mean, I came to the strong realization that they were people before they were mom and dad.
Mm.
And my
Yes.
story begins before my story even begins. And when I started contrasting the answers my mom had offered to these questions about like how did I come to be, I started thinking about how my kids came to be. I realized that before my oldest was born, I was a person too. But
Mm-hmm.
being a person in a lot of ways, it got put on pause because I had to become a dad.
Right.
And so the exploration, the development, the curiosity about life, this drive to improve in a lot of ways, it took a back seat to the fact that like I had to sanitize bottles, and I needed to mix formula, and I
Mm-hmm.
needed to buy car seats and strollers. I needed to go to medical appointments. I needed to earn a paycheck. I needed to put food on the table. There were just like so many things that were in the way of me being the best person I could be, because I was stuck in the singular role of being dad. Now, taking things back now around full circle, it's like, as an adult child looking at my parents, and like any adult child should be looking at their parents, I wish more people could just see something that it took me so long to see, which is that my parents didn't set out to screw me up. They may not have set out to like give me the best shot in life. That it just They might have been just too busy dealing with the practical everyday stuff, and it's like my emotional and psychological well-being, they weren't considered, because like they were too busy considering how to keep me fed and clothed to
Right.
worry about this other stuff. And I would imagine that most people's parents, to some degree, it's like that. It doesn't even have to be a case necessarily of um like times are tight financially, or I was a single mom or single dad, whatever the case may be. As parents, we always have parental responsibilities that dominate the landscape of who we are. Most of us, if not all of us, at some point are going to deal with that identity crisis of, who the hell am I? I've been
Mhm.
dad for so long, I don't remember who AC is.
Right.
I don't even know, like, I start stressing about it. Okay, so like my oldest kid is 21, my youngest is 16. He's needing me less and less all the time. What happens when he moves out? Who the hell am I then? Like, I don't even know who I am anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever I was before I became a parent, that guy doesn't exist. I don't know who exists after I'm done raising kids. And with all this confusion, all this distraction, all this loss of connection with self, realizing, dealing with like firsthand with family estrangement, hearing other people's estrangement stories, I realize I'm going to be accountable for
Mm-hmm.
this person that I don't understand, that I'm disconnected from. That sucks.
Right.
And again, like, it is an encouragement to the estranged adult kids out there. Yeah, you know what? Your concerns are valid. They're real. Your feelings are important.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another side to this that has to be factored in. I'm not saying like factored in at the expense of your own
Correct.
validation, but I don't think, as much as it's unfair for your parent to validate themselves at your expense, it's equally unfair for you to validate yourself at their expense. Don't put your parents on trial. Have a conversation. There are things that they're not going to remember, things that were important to you. That was Tuesday afternoon for them because they were too busy dealing with other stuff. They're not necessarily trying to invalidate you by saying, you know what, I see things differently. I mean, like, all of us as individuals, it's like, our details, they're very big details. These are the only details that we're firsthand experiencing. We can have a profound moment that nobody else in the room notices. Like, they're not being jerks when they say, I'm sorry, like, I don't remember. They're being honest because they don't remember. And why the hell should they? It was your big moments, not theirs. And this is why the conversation is so valuable. An interrogation, a trial, it doesn't open the door for reciprocal conversation. What it does is it creates an environment where one person shuts down and the other person becomes antagonistic. I don't think you're serving your own best interest when you become that antagonistic person. You don't
Mm-hmm.
serve your parents. Like, there's no healing to be had there. I know we all like to say, like, look, like, the day's going to come where I'm going to be bigger and stronger than you, and then you're going to pay. I mean, like, I'm 6'4" and like 270 plus pounds. My mom's a feeble 81-year-old. The day I dreamed about when I was a child, would I be bigger and stronger, is here. I don't
Right.
want to abuse that.
Right.
you know, I realize that, like, that day of retribution, it doesn't come, and it shouldn't come, because it's not healthy. It's toxic. I don't want to poison myself, and I don't want to see anybody else as an estranged adult child poison themselves either. The Dalai Lama said drinking, holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Don't drink that poison. It's not worth it. It's just really not.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I agree. I have, as much as my mom can still trigger me in moments like that, I have reached this place in my life where I recognize the struggles that happened when I was little, and that she couldn't be present, and she was probably not present for her own life, for her own self, let alone me, and trying to navigate and manage her way through life. One of the things that I wanted to kind of circle back around to, number one, I think it's important to recognize it for many estranged adult children. I think it's impossible for them to get to that place to be able to entertain what you're talking about here today until they've done some of their own work, right? And dealt with some of their own struggles and beliefs and all the things, because they're so activated and so triggered all the time. Being able to sit down and have a conversation with a parent that's highly triggering, it just isn't going to work. So something has to shift. Either they get themselves into therapy and they begin working through their own stuff with a goal, and stating the goal to the therapist. My goal is to reconcile with my parent. Help me to get there, right? Don't help me to continue this estrangement and think that there's no hope for reconciliation, or that that's really in my best interest. What's going to be in my best interest is to heal the relationship with my parents, or my parent, not to continue something that's broken and not working. When here's something that I want to say to adult children that I know as a parent, just as when you hear from your parent that I'm sorry and please forgive me, and I will move better and do better and all of these things, that's impactful to the adult child to hear from their parent. Just as impactful to hear for the parent from the adult child of, I recognize you're not perfect. I recognize you're human and you made mistakes. I'd like you to take accountability for those mistakes so that I can find forgiveness and extend that to you. There's nothing that, for me as a parent, that I long to hear more from my children than, I forgive you.
Mm.
Because I'm here to tell you that the parents that I work with, the mothers that I work with, the amount of guilt that they carry, myself included, is immense. And to know that, I'm willing to do the work. I've done the work. I continue to do the work. I continue to try to show up. I continue all the things for my children. And it would be lovely on some occasion to be recognized for that work. Not that I need accolades and all of this, but a recognition of my humanness as I was parenting my children. And I know that that is hard to do. I mean, it was hard for me to do as an adult child with my parents for a long, long time. But as I've said before on this podcast, my children haven't done their work in therapy. My parents haven't done their work in therapy. I did my work. And that shifted the relationship. And I set out to give forgiveness, extend forgiveness to my parents, and extend forgiveness to my children who hurt me, right? They hurt me, but I haven't held the grudge for that. And I couldn't have done that without having done my work. I just couldn't have. I would have been way too triggered and way in myself, with all the things that I believe to be the correct way and the right way, and etc. So I don't know where that place is. I think that one of the things that I'd like to extend for parents and adult children to think about, especially adult children, is if you're not able to have that conversation with your parent, for whatever reason, you feel there's, I don't know, all the things, but to reach out to someone who might be able to sit with you as you talk with them and try to help, either your therapist, so a coach, some people like you and I, AC, to be able to help hold that space and help people to be able to begin the very long road of seeing the humanness in one another as parent and adult child.
Yeah, I think another good opportunity for people to engage in this too is maybe to interact with somebody that could fill maybe like a surrogate role. One of the places that I think would be a great place to do that is the new group that's starting up, where it's going to be estranged adult children, estranged parents, not from the same families, of course, to have an opportunity to interact, ask each other questions, have some dialogue, hopefully gain some understanding of their situations through interacting with people who are strangers. Because whereas we may not all know each other, there's so many similarities in these estrangement stories where I do feel that most estranged adult children could have a productive conversation with most estranged parents and gain a lot of understanding and open the door to a path toward healing. It's just so easily, but you have to engage in the conversation. And as I understand right now, we've got a decent amount of people who have applied as estranged parents for the group. We are like in serious, I don't want to say desperate, but serious need of having more estranged adult children join in. And this isn't a case of like anybody trying to crucify each other. This is a case of everybody trying to support and empower each other and help each other gain an understanding so that all of our family relationships can reach healthier, happier places. So sorry for just jumping in with a shameless plug, but there is an application process just to make sure everybody is kept as safe and protected emotionally as humanly possible. Please reach out to Kreed via email. I'm sure she'll provide the contact information if she hasn't already. And just like, let's all just start talking to each other. We can disagree, we can agree, but like through all of that, we'll all understand better.
Exactly. I could not agree more. And I also think that this group is the perfect place to have these conversations. The conversation that you and I have had today would be a perfect conversation for this group. How do we come to the table? How do we begin to get curious about the other side? When does that happen? Under what circumstances, et cetera, and having it not be from folks from the same family, I think is going to be even it's going to be less taxing and less less triggering, I think, on some level. I mean, I think that there will still be some moments just because of the way that estrangement works, but I'm hopeful for it. We have had a couple of since the last time you and I talked. The parents are really questioning. The parents are wanting that information. They're what do we need to do? How do we need to do it? Why, why this, why that, etc. And I'm sure that the kids have the exact, their own set of questions on that side.
same thing. Why did this happen and why did that happen? So yeah, reach out. I'll put the information in the show notes, the email address, but to say it here, it's theestrangedheart@gmail.com. So email if you're interested in being a part of that group so we can get the application out to you. That should go out next week. So the week of the 7th. Yeah, the week of the 7th of August for the group to start in September. So great reminder, AC. Thank you for that. So yeah, anything else in closing today regarding this?
Yeah, I would just like to say that, like, in the meantime, while we're waiting for the group to hopefully get properly populated so that we can get things going, if there are any estranged parents out there that feel that they could benefit from my perspective, like even if it's on a private personal level, like I'm receptive to communicating with y'all. If you're interested in having a private chat, like that's awesome. If you'd like to share your story with me in an interview format, I'm open to that too, whether it be on this podcast or on another one. You know, we can figure something out. It just, I don't want anybody to feel like they're going through this, you know, blind, or that they have questions that they are desperate to have answered that Kreed and I just haven't had the chance to get to yet. We are trying to get to all of the questions, but there's so many things to address and so much nuance to these situations where I feel like every conversation we have is an exercise in unavoidably chasing our tails sometimes.
Right.
But, you know, if you've got specific questions, you can email them in. We will get to them as we can. If you can't wait for that, again, reach out to one or both of us directly, and we'll do the best we can to fix you up.
Perfect. What a great way to close for today. Yes, reach out. You don't have to go through this alone. You don't. And we'll, as AC has said, you know, every situation, while there's the common thread that runs through every estrangement situation that I've come across, things are very nuanced, and to say that one thing is going to work for this one that worked for the other one is just not logical. So we have to you know, dive into it and learn all the wherefores and what fors and etc. So yeah, I think, you know, to kind of circle back around, you mentioned earlier in our conversation that you know, is this a change of tactic or a change of heart? And I think I'd like to leave it with that today for consideration for both sides.
Yeah.
You know, is this what we're doing, what we're expecting? And get curious around that. So if that's all for today, we'll go ahead and we'll close this up.
That's all, folks.
Okay.
This brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent, and that you are able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey, wherever you may be on your estrangement and reconciliation path. If you feel you've received something helpful or positive from this podcast, please consider following us, sharing this podcast with others, leaving a positive review, perhaps entertaining becoming a guest on our show, or following us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. As a reminder, there is an online support group on Facebook. If you are a estranged mom who identifies as being spiritual and approaches estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame and judgment, and desire to do inner self-work and reflection, please seek us out. We can be found at facebook.com/estranged mothers support group. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to have your story shared on the podcast, anonymously or not, please reach out to me via email at theestrangedheart@gmail.com.